Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Tim Conley, all the way from beautiful Arizona, where he might be attacked by a crowd of wild dogs or dinosaurs. We're not sure quite which. But when he's not doing that, he is an amazing executive coach, and he runs a group called The Forge for entrepreneurs. And he's been an entrepreneur himself for a long time, expert on marketing and many other things. And also, he does use his intuition in his business, and we're going to dig into that and how he does that and the difference between tactile business feel and emotional feelings and how you can get into your zone in the business and what to do if you've got total resistance to meditation, but you really want to listen to your intuition. So, and we'll probably touch on hiring and how to have a good fit there and probably some other crazy stuff. So, and he used to be the host of Foolish Adventure, which is an amazingly popular podcast. Unfortunately, stopped running, but lots of cool episodes there. And I'll put the link for that in the show notes. So welcome, Tim.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Absolutely. So when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that you have like a business tactile feel, but that's not the same thing as having emotional feelings about something in your business. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I'm a big stickler for word choice. So I believe that the words that we use they end up informing what we actually think and believe. So we try to have a thought, and then we try to explain that thought. In our process of trying to explain something, that's usually where we end up using the wrong word, not one that we really meant, or we're using the right word in that we're trying to hide something. So I'm a big stickler on what do you actually mean? So you and I were talking about feeling. And when I use the word feeling, I'm not talking about emoting, where we have our emotions, we're all full of them, and they express in a multitude of ways. But when I use the word feeling, because I'm a very tactile person, so I actually mean like these things, my fingers right here, I mean it in a metaphorical sense that I can feel tactically what is going on in my mind. And how my mind connects with the world, and what's going on that I need to solve or engage with, versus and the actual emotions that I'm feeling. Am I scared? Am I angry? Am I excited? What is it that I'm emoting? So I use them.
What's the difference between scared and excited there, Tim? I think they're the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, because they're the same. They're both sides of the fight or flight sense. So, and I'm glad you brought that up. When I first started doing public speaking, I was just kind of thrown into it in the military, and I was so scared, like to the point of nearly vomiting, and I said, there's just no way I can keep giving these talks if I'm going to feel sick every single time I'm in front of these people. So I realized that those butterflies that is feeling, I love the term butterflies versus, nausea, because at least butterflies are pretty and they're a wonderful creature versus I'm nauseated right now. So taking that butterfly energy and actually turning it into a kinetic energy. So I started teaching myself to just start, if I was not around the audience, I would start jumping up and down. I'd be like bouncing and take that knot that was starting to coalesce in my midsection and turn that into actual kinetic energy, and fear turned to excitement. So then I was like, wow, I am ready to actually go out and talk to these people. and so, they are so close to the same thing, but I see fear is you start pushing those feelings down and you try to squash them. you internalize them, versus excitement, you push that out into the world, and it gives you more energy. It's like you get rid of energy, but somehow you end up with more. That's how I see the difference between fear and excitement. That was one heck of a tangent.
Yeah, no, that's a great, well, I think it's a useful tangent, because nearly every entrepreneur does public speaking, or they make YouTube videos, or however they get in front of people. So, and I think wasn't there a quote that said most people are more afraid of public speaking than dying?
Yeah, so. I think that's anytime somebody does a poll, it's easier to say I'm more afraid of public speaking than dying, because dying is not imminent. But I think anytime death is imminent, people are going to be a lot more scared of it than actually scared of public speaking. They'd be like, I would give anything to be a public speaker if I didn't die right now.
Yes, I could imagine if it was more imminent. And I was just reading a book on the Vietnam War in Huey, I think it's pronounced, and the Marines and the Viet Cong had a bit of a mess. So
yeah,
I could see those people as they were being pinned down by machine guns saying, "Oh, can I just do some public speaking instead?" You know?
Right.
But you mentioned you were in the military. What, are you allowed to say what you did, or was it super secret?
Oh, I wish it was super secret. No. I did environmental work in the Air Force. Oh. So my job title was called bioenvironmental engineering, and wow. So I did a lot of environmental work, and another section of my job was industrial hygiene. My wartime job, the thing that if I was ever deployed in a war scenario, was chemical, biological, and nuclear warfare. So, wow. So I learned that's how I spent 4 years, was around environmental work and protecting people in their work environments. And then if I was out deployed, then I would be protecting people from hazardous chemicals and such. So, yeah.
Well, it sounds a more valuable thing to be doing than shooting people.
Oh yeah. And that's one of the reasons I picked going into the Air Force. I really wanted to travel the world. I knew I had a greater shot at traveling the world if I joined, say, the Army or the Marines. But it had been a while when I joined, which I joined in at the end of 1989. The United States really hadn't been in a major conflict for a while. So
well, and the Berlin Wall had just fallen, right? So you probably
I was
cross your fingers
in basic training. I was in basic training when the wall fell. So so that was a big shift. And so about what was that, beginning of 1991. The United States went to war with Saddam Hussein for the very first time, and we've essentially been at war ever since. So I'm kind of glad I used my intuition and said, odds of me dying or needing to kill someone will be greatly reduced if I go into the Air Force, and I was correct.
And so in the military, do you, I mean, the military is often perceived as a very logical kind of place, right? There are orders and rules and what have you, but I get the suspicion that really when it comes to the fog of battle, that people do use their intuition.
I can't really speak to that because I've only ever been in training exercises where they try to mimic an actual war zone, and so I've been gassed. A couple of times a year for like 4 years. So seven or eight times I've been gassed. It's just tear gas, but oh my gosh, it will change. It'll change your state pretty fast when every part of your body that is like soft tissue starts just gushing, so nose and mouth and eyes are just gushing with fluids, trying to expel this the tear gas. and your skin's on fire because you're sweating, so your pores are open and it goes inside your skin, and so like your whole body's on fire, and so I've had those experiences, and being in situations where you're under those conditions and yet you still have to perform, and so you have to do your job even though your body says, do everything possible to fix this pain right now. Your body's telling you to do that, but you have to get past that. And so that part comes into relying on your training so that your body just functions. But then the other part is you can barely see, you're in so much pain, it's interfering with cognition. So you start having to feel your way through these scenarios. So that's all I've ever experienced. I would say that would be 100 times worse when you could die in the process. I wasn't worried about dying. Even in those situations, I was never worried that I was going to die. So if there was a chance that I could die or that I'd have to kill someone, I think I think enough of your cognition would shut down due to adrenaline that you would have to go on to feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what I've read from people like who were in Iraq and they just got a bad feeling about something, and then they discovered later when they didn't take that road that there was an IED, an improvised explosive device there, and they just people do. It's sort of like when how when someone's staring at you from behind, most people get this feeling of the hairs on the back of their neck going up.
Oh yeah.
I think most people can relate to that. And I think in business or in the military or in any other career, that we do get these feelings. The question is, do we pay attention to them?
Most of the time we never do.
Yeah. Why is that, do you think?
Well, let's go with Western thought. I'm a bit of an armchair philosopher. So in Western thought, we're told and taught from a very young age, this is thousands of years old now, that Western thought is more about rationalization. Humans aren't actually rational creatures. We're, post facto rationalists. So we spend a lot of time rationalizing what's happening. So we have a feeling, and if what's considered rational doesn't match with the feeling, we go with the rational thing. And
how's that work for most business?
Usually not well. But there's other times where people don't like to use their rationalization. They emote. They go with their emotion, not really their feeling, but the emotion that comes from that feeling, and then they don't have good results either. There's this, I believe that there's this sweet spot between that feeling, that sense that we have that we should go this direction, and the rationalization that occurs afterwards. There's probably this, and I'd say it's a little tiny sliver, right? It's not like a big wide gray area. I think it's a little tiny one between emoting and over rationalization. I think there's this really narrow spectrum that we have, that we push down. We either don't listen to it. We don't listen to it in one form or another, because we're either emoting or we're over rationalizing.
So if someone listening, they're an entrepreneur or they're a business leader, and they're like, I'd really like to use my intuition more in my business, when I'm hiring or doing sales or whatever activity they get up to, how can they expand that intuition zone and cut back on those other two things, the rationalizing and the emoting?
I would say start some form of meditation. If you haven't done any kind of meditation, start there. Some people really get a meditative effect from running or lifting heavy weights, because it disconnects the mind from what the activity that's happening right now. Do that. and it's good for your body anyways, to give it some exercise. Go for a long walk. There's so many ways to ease into meditation, to give your brain an opportunity to process, because we're hit with just so much sensory input from just the sounds, the radiation in the air, like in our environment. We're hit with all sorts of stuff constantly, and our brain has to filter it just so we can get through our day. But then there's real important inputs. There's real important inputs that we have to pay attention to. And if we never allow our brains to decompress, to not have to deal with a lot of extra inputs that we get in our modern life, if we never allow that, then we can't pay attention. So I'd say meditation is really important. Whatever form you choose, whatever form resonates with you, meditation is important to get to a point where you can actually listen to yourself.
And I know I was reading in The Forge the other day where you said you used to listen to podcasts when you walked, but you stopped doing that. Tell us a bit what your motivation was, because so many entrepreneurs listen to podcasts.
Well, I realized that when I'm working, and all those sensory inputs are being channeled and trying to put it into something useful, something tangible. And when I'm walking, I was consuming. And so at no point was my brain getting a rest. So I would take these long walks and I would come back from a long walk. I'd take my dogs out. We'd go out into the desert. We'd take like a 4 or 5 mile walk out into the desert and come back. And then I wouldn't feel refreshed. My brain wasn't refreshed. And so I realized, here's a perfect opportunity for me to give space in my head for me and creativity and everything else that's important to what I do. Here was a great opportunity, and it takes me a while to go have this long walk. So why not give myself the opportunity to take advantage of that? And so I did. So I stopped listening, and at first it was like, oh, I should be doing something while I'm walking, because it was so ingrained in my head. It's such a habit. So I felt antsy. And then after a little while, I actually just got into this flow where I would be in my own little world, just out walking, and then I'd come back and I was refreshed. My body got exercise, but my mind was fresh. And then it was so much easier to be on for my clients, because they pay me a lot of money. So I have to be spot on every single time. And I needed to give them not just, and it just wasn't for me. It was also for the work that I do. I needed to have this empty space so that I could be the best at what I do.
That is a great realization you had, that you actually could achieve more in your business by taking empty space so you could decompress instead of always having to be busy.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest traps with entrepreneurs. And I work with them a lot, basically trying to get them to do less work. And and all of them, every single one of them, fight me on it for a while. But once they actually see that when they do less work, more gets accomplished in their business, they have more impact in the world, more of their goals, more of their desires become a reality, then they become a true believer. They become and I think that's, as I was saying, that process of when I stopped listening to podcasts on my walk, that antsy feeling, that part in the between where I was and what was comfortable and where I was going, that antsy feeling. So many entrepreneurs get that. They're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. I've been doing 12, 14-hour days for 2 years now, so it feels wrong for me to do 9 hours. and so they get really, really antsy. And so a lot of times they'll just jump back to their old behavior because it makes them feel comfortable, but it doesn't give them what they're after. It doesn't give them the impact in the world that they're actually after.
Yeah, because, no matter how busy you are, there's a limit to how much one human can do.
Oh, exactly.
And some of the stuff entrepreneurs do, like leading people, creating vision, it's hard to do that if you're half asleep or, stressed out or haven't decompressed.
They think they're on, right? Because I'm busy. I am busy. Busyness is a bane for entrepreneurial success. Being busy prevents you from doing great work.
I've got to write that one down in the show notes.
All right.
And let me just repeat it, busy, because I think it's important. Busyness is a bane. It's an unusual word.
I don't get to use my vocabulary very much. When I got into copywriting, that kind of ruined my vocabulary, because all copywriting is all the best copywriting tells you to like dumb down your language, and so I don't get to use my vocabulary as much as I would really like.
So you mentioned some ways that, folks listening could get started with meditation, and how that feeling that we always have to be busy might be getting in their way. Are there any other things you've observed in yourself or clients as to resistance to meditating? Because I think that's a very common thing.
Well, it depends on their background, how they were raised. So some people are raised that meditation is bad or it's hokey or something. So, but then they were also raised to pray. So it's like, well, then pray. then if because the actual end result of devout prayer is much like the end result of meditation. It ends up pulling you away from you and allowing space in your head. So for some people, if that's where they were raised and that they're comfortable, go there, get started there.
And I think there's more than one form of prayer out there. I mean, there's the kind where you're asking requests to whoever you're praying to. And there's also the kind where you're listening for answers, where you're being quiet.
I was raised in an evangelical Christian home and church, and so in our teaching that I'd gotten, it was both, right? That you would that there was a communication back and forth, right? So you communicated to and received back. Where some faiths don't have that at all. It's you either listen or you tell, right? You go and you give your alms and you ask for something and then you walk away, right? Some faiths have that. My understanding of a certain Christian faiths are the give and take.
And then there are other faiths where you just repeat effectively a mantra, whether you're saying a rosary or some Hindu mantra or whatever, which is another way to some people meditate. So, or some people just go to a temple or a church, when there's not necessarily a service happening, when it's just really quiet, and they just sit in the space.
Right.
That's another way.
For me,
or go out into nature, into the desert.
Yep. Going out in the desert. I think nature is probably, especially for modern humans that are not getting a connection to nature, is probably one of the main causes of mental illness, is not being connected to nature, not being connected to the things that make us human. So I think that's a great place to start. For me, I accidentally stumbled on my deepest meditative state in the act of doing work, manual labor. So I told you a story before we started recording. Was I used to make cabinetry and furniture, and I would start sanding the wood, and taking a wood from a rough state down to a very fine, a smooth touch would take hours, just hours and hours to get it perfect. And in that time, I would completely lose myself. The only thing that existed was me touching the wood. That's all that existed. Nothing else existed. Not myself, not the world. Just that sensation of me touching the wood is the only thing that existed. And that's where I truly learned the power of a meditative state, was when you could completely disconnect. It opened up so much creativity. It opened up so much energy, just actually being revitalized. Here I had spent hours just sitting there sanding wood. And then after I was done, I had just as much, if not more energy than before. After all those hours of work, I still had more energy. So I think that's what's critically important about at least attempting it. And it takes a while. And at least when you start finding that meditative state, you're able to achieve so much more in the rest of your life, the rational side of your life.
So that sounds like it's a really useful skill to have in your business, to be able to go into that zone. And also, I'm just thinking it's a useful skill for any staff you have to also be able to do in the work they do.
Oh yeah, don't get me started
how
on
do we
entrepreneurs who don't help their entrepreneurs who don't help their team to become better.
Why would an entrepreneur not help their team to become better? Isn't it in their own self-interest?
It is.
Plus,
that's what makes it so crazy. You would think that would be their first instinct, right? But no, entrepreneurs' first instinct is improve myself first. Improve me. I need to get more productive. I need to get in a better creative state. I. It's like, no, get out of you and start looking at the impact you're having in the world. And you have these people you've hired. Those people are getting paid to help you achieve your vision. So why wouldn't you make them better? It's so self-serving. So obviously self-serving, but it is one of the last places entrepreneurs go to actually improving themselves personally. They could get there faster if they helped improve their team.
And that might be hiring better people for the team. It might be helping the team dynamic improve, having a clear vision and picture for your team. Coaching people within your team to improve, swapping people out and around who, someone's weak in this area but strong someone else, so let's rearrange what roles people have.
Right.
Or maybe just telling the team, let's go improve. I'm here to support you.
Right. Giving people just the space and letting them know that you actually want them to improve. And you will help them. They won't believe you at first, especially if you've never done it before. They won't believe you because no one else has done. No other place that they've ever worked has done that either. So they're not going to believe you. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some coaching. You're going to have to spend time actually talking to these people, these other human beings. You will, as an entrepreneur, have to talk to them and talk to them like people. And it's amazing what happens, what kind of results you get when you do that.
I mean, one of the strategies I've used in that area is just ask people to come up with a name for their better self. What's their ideal self? So in my case, it might be Magical Michael or whatever the name, or Magnificent Michael, or whatever name I came up with. And then they can always ask, that famous question, what would Jesus do? You can ask, well, hey, what would Magnificent Michael do? Or what would Terrific Tim do? And if they have a clear picture of, hey, this is my ideal self, and what would he or she do in this situation, often gives them inspiration.
Right.
And that sets it also, if I've asked people to write out, tell me what is this ideal version of yourself like, and have them write it down so they've got a clearer idea of who they want to be.
And what their ideal self isn't like. And
Yeah.
which are one, and I think that for a lot of people, that the negative side of things are so much easier to identify. I guess we're kind of like raised that way. I don't know what the instinct is, but when I work with my clients and I ask them what they want, they immediately start telling me all the things they don't want. Like, that wasn't the actual question. The question was the opposite of that. What do you want? Not what do you not want? So sometimes in that exercise of the ideal person, who is the ideal person not? And then they can, makes it easier for them to make that transition over to, okay, so if I'm not this, then what am I? This would be the ideal one.
That is a great technique to pivot from what you don't want to what you do want. Because focusing on what we don't want, only helps. Exactly. So you mentioned that the entrepreneurs often resist improving their team. Any ideas why that is? You mentioned they focus on improving themselves, but are there other fears or resistances going on there?
Losing control. I want to,
oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh. And it's, which I find immensely funny. An entrepreneur who wants to build a very large company, multi-million-dollar company. There's no possible way you can run a multi-million-dollar company all by yourself and without destroying your life, destroying relationships, destroying everything else in your life. There's no way you can do it. So the best way to do that is allow other people to do to actually run that company, because you're going to need other people. And that loss of control, the loss of self-importance, I think that's one of the things I run into the most, because I get asked by entrepreneurs as I'm trying to get them to do less work. I call it firing yourself. Let's fire you from every job inside this company. And then they say, well, if I'm successful at that, then what do I do? What about me? It's like, well, we have to make space. We have to make space for you to do something amazing. But you can't do anything amazing because you're down here trying to control this tiny thing. You're trying to control all these people. You're trying to make yourself important in this little tiny dot, when you will become more important if you let go of all that. If you let go of all that, you're able to have a greater legacy. And again, it's one of those things that's self-serving, but for most entrepreneurs, it's counterintuitive. They just cannot see how me doing less work equals having greater effect on the planet, or my community, or my family, or whatever it is that's important to them. They just have such a hard time seeing that.
Those sound pretty big blocks to improving your team. As well as maybe, I think sometimes people have a belief they shouldn't be, if they had a really good team, they'd have to pay too much and they're afraid they don't have enough money. Or if they hire good people, they'll just leave immediately and they need to hire B players so that they hang around
or steal
more.
my business or whatever it is, right? There's always an excuse.
I don't think employees are interested in stealing a business. If they wanted a business, they'd be entrepreneurs.
Exactly. Yeah. So those things I see as symptoms of the larger identity. What happens to my identity if these other things are taken outside of my control? I see that a lot.
So what is the answer to that? If you're going to give up that control and all those tasks and have more decompression time, what is your identity then?
You get to make a new one. Here's something I don't have any kind of backing on. So I think we need an identity as rational beings. If we don't have one, we give ourselves one, right? We label ourselves with a million different labels if necessary. We like to categorize things as humans. So we're going to categorize ourselves one way or another. And so giving people the opportunity to make that shift of, okay, this old identity served me for here, where I'm at. It got me here, but I'm going to have to open up my identity to see which identity I'm going to take on next. And if we don't open that up, if we don't start making certain changes, we'll just stay stuck. We'll stay stuck right here because our identity says this is it. Our identity says we can't go past this point. So we need to start opening up space. One little trick that I found so far is all my clients, they see themselves as good people. You know, they are good people. So I ask them this one question: are your people incompetent? And they don't, no good person likes to say that other person is terrible, right? At least to another human being. They may think it, they may, or whatever, but they don't like to admit it to other people that they actually think this way. So I always ask, are the people that you've hired, are they incompetent? Because that leads to a lot of other things. If they are incompetent, why did you hire them? Why did you keep them? Things like that. If they're not incompetent, then why don't you allow them to be capable? Why don't you allow this? And so that what's the word? Dissonance.